Welcome to Fika's Focus. Voices leading change.
Morena, ladies.
Morena.
Hey.
Today we're having a yarn about some challenging behaviours in a general trend. I think it's in a space of get to know. We want to really shed light on our approach to challenging behaviours, but I think we've got to make clear that every single educational facility in this country will be managing challenging behaviours. I think it's also worth pointing out that challenging does not necessarily mean naughty or those general connotations that tied to the word challenge. I also want to discuss, or probably shed light on the fact that there is a higher frequency of differentiation of behaviours that we are seeing in 2023 to when I started in teaching in 2004. So it's certainly worthwhile having a chat about this. So I think what really drives us, our first point is a little phrase we've been talking about, focusing on the deed, not the dude. Do you guys want to just talk to that a wee bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most important thing for us is looking at the child as a whole and not just at their behaviour or what's going on right in front of us, but, how's their morning been? What's home life like in general? What are their triggers that are in the space? Because it's not always their fault, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. It's not always just a reaction from them, but it could have been how their day started or, personal things going on at home, etc.
Yeah, agreed.
In relation to that, I mean, just if you, as an adult, if you think about you've had a run-in with your husband or wife,
Yes.
The likelihood or the probability of you having a great day is certainly diminished. So
A bad night's sleep.
yeah, a bad night's sleep, all that sort of stuff. So for a child, especially at the age group that we're dealing with, the ability to actually regulate and recognise that that's not a great way to start.
Well, they're still learning those skills, right?
Still
And
learn
how to
those
regulate.
skills. And Lauren, in that space of regulation, what are we talking about? Because I know we talk about helping a child regulate. What exactly are we talking to there?
In terms of challenging behaviours, it is supporting them through how they're feeling, being able to put a label to the emotion that they're feeling and regulating for them, because a lot of times they can't, particularly with under fives.
So when we so a good terminology there is social coaching. What does that look like? So say, for example, little Ray has had a missed breakfast, mum's growled him, chucked him in the car, and little Ray is just dumped at the daycare and he's really upset. And so my first interaction is I push over little Russell and hurt him. What's the social coaching that goes on there to help little Ray regulate and almost learn?
So for that situation, I would be supporting Russell first, consolidating that and sorting him, supporting what he needed then, and then it would be coming to you to find out what's actually going on. Most children can tell you if they're hungry for a start. So for me, it's finding the basic needs first. Are they warm? Are they fed? Have they had enough water? Have they slept?
Yes.
Getting those basic needs first and then actioning from there. Are they hungry?
Nappy
changed. Yep.
Yeah, those sorts of things. So just going into Russell, so because little Russell's just faced the wrath of little Ray.
Yep.
What do you mean? Like talk us through that, because I think this is a generic approach that you'd see in an early childhood centre. What does that mean? You'd see or meet his needs?
It goes back to what that child needs. Every child is different, so it's finding out what Russell needs. Does he need time by himself to regulate on his own, or does he need you to step in to offer a cuddle? Does he need whatever he needs? Does he need to find a new friend? Does he need support to find someone else to play with because he now doesn't trust little Ray? And that's actually okay. So it's supporting in that space. And 9 times out of 10, they can, if they can't verbally communicate, they can at least gesture and tell you what they want. And if they can't, you should know the child well enough to be able to support with what's next for them.
And what's some of our Ash? What's some of our wording that we might use with Russell to just reaffirm that the behaviour that we're here to help, and that the behaviour, not the person, the behaviour, is the focus.
I think it's okay to label what's just happened. Like, I can see that Ray's really upset you by and name what's upset the child, and then go into the, like you said, mode of caring and cuddling and making sure they're okay or whatever it is that they need. So making sure that, I think if we verbalise, even for Ray to hear that this is why Russell's upset because your
Yes.
little Ray's gone and hurt or pushed or
Yeah.
because I think labelling the behaviour for them and the emotion that they might be feeling is important too. Because, for example, in our 2-year-old room, in our wairiti space, they don't always know what they're feeling. They can't always express that emotion. So if we can help to voice the words, then that's sinking in. Yeah.
But also letting them know that the behaviour is not okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think is quite important because
And
for
letting
some,
Russell know that.
yes, because I think for some children, the behaviours are learned. It is an expectation at home. It's something they've viewed anywhere, literally anywhere. Could have been at the playground the other week that was a behaviour they saw, and that was a mode of communication. They were like, yeah, that worked for that child, so I'm going to give that a go. Because it is a little bit of trial and error with under fives. They're trying to figure out what is and what isn't okay and what works for them. Yes. So it's just making sure that both parties know that behaviour is not okay here, and this is our response.
Language acquisition is a real tough thing for, especially we're talking about toddlers. Like you can't expect a toddler to be like, oh, excuse me, that sort of behaviour just doesn't align with my, like it just doesn't.
Or even naming the fact that they're frustrated.
Yeah.
Like that's quite a difficult emotion to.
And I also
articulate.
think a current trend is that we are finding, and this is just societal norms based on what 2023 looks like. There is less opportunity for parents to interact with their children because you can put them in front of a device. So a lot of, like anything, like if you watch some fantastic programs like Blue's Clues, like with Cortez, he loved Blue's Clues. And it was repetitive, and it was the same thing as songs, and and he could dance and sing to it, and we always used to sing, and his language acquisition was really, really high, so he can actually verbalise how he's feeling. If you don't have that acquisition of language, it is very hard to tell someone to get away from me because I am not in a good mood.
Yeah.
And that's us actually vouching for the child themselves. That is almost the perpetrator of the behaviours. Most likely is in some spaces we just see they don't have the language. How can you ask someone to move away if you can't ask someone to move away?
Yeah.
So that's an important part. In terms of aggressive behaviours, which we don't need to go through, I think people can kind of figure out what those aggressive, what is aggressive in that space, but there certainly are aggressive behaviours. What are some of the common methods that we would employ to support the child who might be utilising those behaviours as a means of communication? Ash?
So you meaning strategies that we would implement?
Yes.
Yeah, so as a team, we would work together to, first of all, we'd be looking at observations of the child, and then we would move through to creating a plan alongside the whānau so that we were working as one. Family needs to be aware of what's going on with this child in our space, and if that's happening at home, and what are the triggers and what are the moments, times a day that these things are happening, and then moving into strategies to support the behaviour and making sure that everyone in the space is on the same page, including whānau at home.
Yeah, consistency is really important.
Yes, and when we're saying is it happening at home, what we're asking to look for is patterns, right? It's generally it will present itself in a pattern. What does that look like? And I think we've got to break that down a wee bit, because in our classrooms there's often 4 or 5 or 6 adults in that space. What does that cohesion look like, Lauren? What would be some signs of a real good application of the plan?
For me, it's consistency, right? Like the teaching team needs to all be on the same page with the plan.
So we see a behaviour. So everyone takes the same approach.
Yeah, down to the wording and the tone used.
So can you give? Yeah, because that's cool. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I love that. So let's talk. Let's give some clear examples. Do you have any clear examples?
Yep. So again, it's as a teaching team, right? It's what works for that teaching team and that particular child. Like I've got to talk in a real generic sense because I don't have specific place in creating a behaviour response on the floor. But it's making sure that the language is consistent. That behaviour is not okay. Depending on aggressive behaviour is such a wide topic, right? And I think it's really important as a teaching team to identify aggressive behaviour, what is mild, moderate or severe, and then the responses to the individual mild, moderate, severe behaviour. Because something that's mild for you might be severe for me. So it's making sure that the
based
teaching...
on experiences.
Yes, and prior knowledge.
Yes.
So it's working with that teaching team to actually identify and categorise what is mild, what is moderate, and what is severe, and then what are the responses, working in with the whānau, with strategies around those behaviours.
It means so much to me because when my time, which is probably the best years of some of my teaching career, because I worked with some of the best teachers I've ever worked with was in Manirewa. What was a normal behaviour for children there was like a suspension type
Somewhere else.
behaviour at another school.
Yeah.
And actually, not that we encouraged that behaviour, but it was showing a deeper willingness to understand the environment they've come from.
Yes.
Yeah. And the relationship that the teaching team has with that whānau to then work together for the best for that child. Like I was thinking about it this morning, knowing that we were doing this podcast, like how to explain it to families that we've got to take in all of the teaching team's expectations and knowledge around behaviours, but we've also got to take in all the parents' expectations and knowledge around behaviour, and then categorise it by mild, moderate, severe, and then create a plan that involves all of the values and beliefs within the entire centre. So it's quite a challenging task.
Because you're building in cultural expectations,
Yes.
you're building experiences of like a first-time parent to maybe their third child.
Yep.
Yep.
You know, I certainly know what I was like.
And even for our teaching team, like we've got some, first year graduates or
Yes.
some unqualified teachers, and then some teachers who have been in the industry for 15 years.
Yep.
So
And got their
Some
own
that have got
kids.
4 or 5 children, and
Yep.
some that have none.
Yep. So it is a very interesting recipe to kind of mix that up. So just going back into the transparency of the plan with the whānau, because that's an important point, Ash. So let's just say we see a behaviour, we decide, right, this is certainly worth digging deeper.
Yep.
So what does it look like in a process? So say little Ray's always walking in,
It's
and
the same thing,
on a Tuesday and Thursday morning he's always pushing little Russell over or something like that.
I think communication is key. So before we even start observing, or documenting behaviours, we've already talked to the parents. If we've got, for example, a repeat biter, we've already told the parent of the child who's biting. So it's not a new thing. Hey, we've got your child on a behaviour plan.
Yeah.
No, that's not how it works. We let them know that this has actually been, ongoing for quite some time now.
Yeah.
We're doing some observations on the child and trying to come up with patterns, like you said, and mitigate, obviously, the behaviour, or where we can support the child to verbalise their emotions rather than doing something negative.
It's almost like for lack of a better description, a 2-week trial period, right?
Yeah.
Like you're figuring out about that child, about the home life, about the holistic child, for what's going on for them, but also trying to identify triggers, time of day,
Yes.
transitions
Yes.
into and out of the classroom, into kai time, into sleep time.
Even as far as like who's dropped off for that
Yes,
day.
yes.
Was it-
Where have
was it
they
mum?
been
Was
in
it
the
dad?
morning?
Yeah. What have they been up
Where
to?
are they going at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Those
Yep.
types of things.
Siblings.
Yes, to create the triggers that we discuss. I think that's really important, that
Yes.
you're taking it as a trial period, but also a trial of strategies. Oh, I've tried this strategy. Oh, that maybe wasn't so successful, but I'm going to try it again. But try this tone or this vocabulary or something slightly different, so that you're working out what strategies you're trying to figure out strategies. Because 9 times out of 10, the whānau are on board and they actually want the help too.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's important that we're using our skill set and our knowledge and our time with their child, with the team that we've got, to then create some sort of strategic
So-
plan almost.
So in terms of segue, interestingly, so my son Cortez, bless him, he's 24 now, but he was the biter. He was the rough and tumble. He was that kid, and in my experience at that time, you feel mortified as the parent of the perpetrator, because he's harming teachers and kids, can I just say he's just been promoted to service manager too, so he's actually a bloody great kid, but
He's not still biting.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, yeah. He's not biting staff or anything. But it was horrible for me as a parent, going in and signing the forms and things. And I think we've got to, yes, we want to look after victims of aggressive behaviours, and we do, and we really do. We offer lots of love and support, but we also need to just remember at points that we have to support the whānau, because it's actually not a nice feeling, especially when the frequency is really high.
And it's out of your control.
Yeah.
I was just going to say
Yeah.
that. And it's, you're dropping them off with us, and that behaviour is happening here with us. And it's so hard to, both ends of this. I've been on both ends as well with my girls, and neither is nice.
No.
Neither is nice.
No, and the holistic approach, what we're trying to do is we're not digging into people's backgrounds and pointing fingers. We're trying to grow a deeper understanding, because, thank God, they have moved away from silly tactics like timeouts and all that sort of junk. Because
Well,
it's
exclusion,
just,
right?
Yeah, it's
because then
rubbish.
it's not supporting them
It's
to
just-
self-regulate,
no,
it's just sending them off on their own.
It's rubbish.
And then it continues.
Yeah,
it just
because they can't.
It's because you're sitting them in a space where they've got to self-regulate, and they're furious, and they're standing there, then they're being punished further by being isolated. And
Because
it's just,
they actually are screaming out for, hey, I actually need help to
Yes,
self-regulate
please
because I
help me.
can't do it myself. And then you're
Exactly.
excluding them and letting them do it themselves,
Yes.
but they don't have the skills to do it.
And thankfully, that sort of behaviour in terms of as a sector is completely gone. And interestingly, coming from a primary lens where you do have modes of, dare I say, punishment, where you can say, oh, we're not going out to morning tea. Oh, no lunchtime. Oh, no sports. No, you're not doing PE. I saw stupid things being implemented at primary, like, oh, well, you can not go out for PE, but you can do some more maths. And then you wonder why they don't like maths, because it's tied into punishment.
Yeah.
I saw all sorts of junk being carried out, and it was really nice for me to walk into a space in the education sector where they weren't aiming to punish kids, because it's just so damaging. It's damaging, and the trend continues. A child that's punished at 5 is generally punished at 8, and the trend and the pattern.
Well, then
really
it comes down to their
continues.
self-worth too, right?
Yeah.
Well, we've got a major effect on their psyche about how they feel about themselves. And that's why I think I love what ECE does, but it does, isolating a kid off does not work.
No.
Agreed.
It just doesn't work. And heaven forbid that they're being isolated off in other ways, in other spaces of personal living.
Exactly.
If we're reinforcing those messages, it's just so damaging. And I know that because I was the naughty kid too. And that sort of damage is just something that early childhood and early learning have taken a stand against, which is something I'm really proud of.
Yeah, I agree. I think in early childhood, even the word naughty, it makes me uncomfortable because it's not terminology that I personally would ever use, because to me a child is never naughty. There's always an underlying reason.
Yeah.
They're trying to communicate. They've come from a background where things have been really hard.
Yes. Yeah. So what about in terms of, let's just talk through that mode of communication when we've communicated with the actual whānau of the child who needs some support. What about just communicating with, like little Russell's family, if we're talking specifically? What does that look like? What can we do? What can't we do?
I think, again, being transparent and open, and those phone calls can be really hard. And sometimes, I do like that to be from our teaching team.
Yes.
They have the best relationships with the whānau, obviously, the children that they're working with. But there are definitely times where I've needed to step in and make the calls and support, because how many calls can you make to one parent about one child before it actually is really emotionally affecting you, because that's happening
Yes.
at your centre.
And we've got to be clear. We have to also still protect the child.
I was just
the
about
other
to say
child.
that. So what we
We've got
can't
to.
do is
Yes.
share who the other child is.
No.
Ever.
We just can't.
Yeah.
We are protecting that child too, because
And their family.
yes, because we've just said, it's not a nice experience for them.
And it's not, I'm really honest, the bite is, the child who's being bitten, that whānau are not thinking about, it's our job to think about the holistic child. That whānau are not thinking about
Yes.
that. They're annoyed that their child's been hurt, and that's okay too, because,
Yeah.
I think it's just, this is why we're sharing this podcast, right, to try and get some understanding around
Yes.
why we do what we do.
We're here to support
Yeah.
both. We don't take sides.
No, not
we
at
don't
all.
take sides. Just quickly, some of the external support we can grab. So obviously the Ministry of Education are a big piece of what we do. So, Lauren, do you want to just talk to some of the avenues there with MOE?
Yep. So what Ash was talking about before about observations and then creating a plan, the ministry have available support for us to reach out to in support of creating that plan. We just have to get verbal or written consent from each family member.
Yep.
So as soon as we're at the point where the plan is created, permission needs to be sought from the whānau to be able to seek ministry advice to be able to create a plan that effectively works for their child.
And we must say that the MOE are stretched. There is... we've been told that, I don't know if it's an official stat, but we've been told that 1 in 4 children coming through our doors will need some level of learning support. So the MOE operate off a budget, themselves. They don't have endless money. And
they do the best they can with what they've got.
Yeah, they
so
do. They
to
do
be
do
able,
the best.
For us to be able to have communication with them, to be able to support children that potentially need plans, that potentially do need funded ministry support, but the ministry aren't in a position to be able to support, that we've got that relationship with them to be able to implement something that's just as good.
Yes, and you talked about bridging the gap there. So we get support, and then they support us with building plans and things. What is that? What are you talking to there, Lauren, with the bridging the gap there?
I think because for children that have challenging behaviours, some need referrals. Some behaviours are extreme enough that we actually physically can't support them on our own. So we actually rely on the ministry to come in and provide additional funding or additional support or additional professional development or resources to be able to support our teaching team to be able to give the best for that child and that family. So I think that's quite important in that space.
We also, the MOE have a lot of guiding documents that we can lean into. We utilise, Future Focus utilises Inspirement, which has... Oh, no, sorry, it's not called Inspirement now. Sorry, it's called
ECE Learning Unlimited.
ECE Learning Unlimited, which was formerly Inspirement, which has workshops, online workshops, which we can work through and talk through, all those sorts of things.
The ministry also has lots of documents online. I mean, obviously, Te Whāriki, our curriculum, has heaps of
Support,
video recordings and things like that. We use He Mā Puna.
He Mai Puna, Te Maiti.
Yep. So that's got quite a few really good strategies in there around communication.
Yep. And those documents are actually available to whānau. We have them in every centre.
Yes.
You can actually come in and have a look at them.
Yeah, and a lot of the ministry plans are based off of those documents.
Yeah, and we've got policy around a lot of that, but a lot of that is driven by those supporting documents, which are heavily researched. They're not just someone making up gobbledygook. They're actually researched. They're put together after years of experience, and they have been very successful in many spaces. So, the general trend of challenging behaviours can be met by a lot of their documentation as well.
Yeah, a lot of them have ages and stages too.
Yes.
So what is appropriate for a particular age?
Which is worth talking to, because it can also give us insight further as parents. It can give us insight into what we could expect around some of that stuff. So it is certainly worth getting out, looking at Te Whāriki. He Mai Puna Te Tamaiti is another document that's available in those spaces. Just the last thing I want to...
Korero or whatever it is.
I want to touch on, the last thing was just going back to emotional regulation, because I think I just want to finish on this. It is harder than it sounds for an adult, let alone a child. And we must not lose sight of that. I know when I get fired up about things, it takes me a while to come down. For a child, it is very, very hard.
Can I just add that it's not always a negative too? Sometimes our children are so
Yeah, hyped.
excited,
Yes.
hyped up,
Yes.
and that's when these behaviours can be happening as well, and that's
Yes.
even harder because you're not expecting it even more so.
Yes, thank you, Ash. That's a very valid point, because it just regulating the body and the change in tone, it is hard. It is.
Yeah, particularly for under threes, and then you get to 3.5, right? Their social learning is heightened. They're like, well, I have friends, like, what is this? Like,
Communication's
how do
happening.
I play with these people? How do I problem solve? How do I communicate? How do I negotiate? How do I compromise? Like,
Yes.
you know,
What,
often you don't want to do this as an adult.
You want to use my crown?
Yeah.
No, hang on, I want to use my crown.
Yeah.
You know, those.
Yeah.
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 And then the person say, oh, I don't like you now because you're not using you don't let me use the crown.
Yeah,
Like,
and then
it's-
that's
Huh?
hard. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
especially when they've come from an environment where they do get the crown given to them all the time. You know, those sorts of things. It's just emotional regulation. I think everyone needs to really dive deep into some of that stuff. It's important to be curious about emotional regulation, but I think it's a great point to end on because it is hard. I'd like to say that our teaching team are just experts at dealing with a lot of that, and they don't necessarily have their own children. I want people to understand that because we are actually educators. We talk about this and brain development and stages and things like that as educators, and they do a good job in terms of advocacy for those children and their behaviours. So.
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay, team. I really appreciate that because I think we're always going to come across it. We're trying to add some insight and getting to know challenging behaviours. We also want to just make sure that people realise that we've got to advocate for both sides. We don't pick sides. We're just trying to support in that space. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you.